Hello and welcome to another Roblox scripting tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you how to use data stores in Roblox Studio. Now, as the title suggests, it is a very basic version of Roblox data stores. It's not a crazy module like profile service, which if you are interested in, I have a link to in the description. Basic data stores are for much smaller games, not for huge projects or even medium-sized projects. If you need a lot of data saved, use something like Profile Service or Data Store 2 or something else like that. I can't remember the name of the other famous data store module. So how they work is it will connect to Roblox's servers that are called data store servers, which will save data for players and you can load that data for them, so their data doesn't get lost every time they leave and rejoin the game. Now, the first thing you need to do, absolutely, is come up to the game settings in the home tab up here. So click on game settings, you're going to go to security. I have HTTP requests turned on. You don't need that, you just need enable studio access to API services enabled. And then we're going to insert two things into server script service. We're going to insert a folder, and we're going to insert a script. I'm going to close the script, we're going to work on it later. I'm going to name the folder to modules, and I'm going to rename the script to something like data framework. Yeah, I like that. Inside of the modules folder, we're going to insert a module script, unsurprisingly, and in that module script, we're going to insert another module script. We're going to rename this module script inside of the first module script to leader stats. This is going to be the module that I want to edit first. And the first module, the parent of the leader stats module, I'm going to name data manager. The exact same thing I named it in the data store tutorial, or not data store, profile service tutorial. As mentioned, I'm going to edit the leader stats module first. It's going to be a very small and simple module. Between the local module and return module, I'm going to write a function, and we're going to do it like this. Function, module, colon, create, and in these parentheses, we're going to put player, colon, player, to declare it as a player object, so we can access a player object's properties. And then we're going to create a folder called leader stats, so local leader stats equals instance.new folder, leader stats.name equals leader stats, and this is very important. Make sure the L in leader stats is lowercase, otherwise it will not show up in the leaderboard. That is very important. It must be spelled exactly like this. Then we're going to drop another line, leader stats dot not name dot parent equals player. Now we're going to create two int values. One of them is going to be cash and the other is going to be gems. These are just examples. They do not have to be this very specifically. Local cash, that's the first one we're going to be doing, equals instance.new int value cash.name equals cash and cash.value. And then we're going to do cash.parent equals leader stats. And to make our life easier, I'm just going to copy and paste this, change this to gems. Then I'm going to copy gems, paste it here, 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 change the name to gems. Now we are done with our leader stats module. We can close this and move on to the data manager. The data manager is the longest and most complicated of the three scripts you are writing today. We only need 5 variables. We need the player service, data store service, we need to access our leader stats module, we need to get our data store, and we need a table for default values in case data can't load or the player has no data when they join the game for the very first time. So we don't need to edit in the module itself right now, we just need to edit at the top of the script, and the first thing we're going to do is get the player service. So local players equals game colon get service players, and data store service, so local data store service equals game colon get service data store service. And of course these are variable names. You don't have to write out data store service. If you want, you can just write DSS, or honestly, you can name it whatever you want. You can name it fart, and it's going to be the exact same thing. I don't know why fart was the first thing that came to my mind. I don't even find fart funny. I'm almost 16, not almost 6, so okay, anyway. Next thing we're going to do is we need to get our data store that we're going to use. So local data store equals data store service colon get data store. Make sure I'm typing that correctly because I can't type today. And the name, we can ignore the scope and the options. Those are completely unimportant. If you know what the scope is and you want a scope, then you can add it, but it's very unimportant for what we are doing right now, or for the way that I do this. I like to save data in tables. So I'm going to name the data store just data store. That's what I name every single data store. I don't know why. It doesn't matter what the name is. You just do not want to change it after you publish the game and people have played, because it is going to wipe every single player's data who has saved data. Now we need our leader stats module, so local leader stats module equals require, I don't know why I'm talking like this, equals require script colon wait for child leader stats. Make sure you have 2 parentheses at the end here, otherwise it will cause an error. Local defaults equals a blank table, cache equals 0, gems equals 0. And basically we're just adding a value in for every single item that we have for our leader stats, or any data that you want to save. Because if you wanted something maybe like credits, you would have it named credits, and see, you'd have it named credits and you could parent it to the player, so it's not visible in the leaderboard, but it's still there. You would still want to put it here. You want to put credits equals 0. And bing bang boom, you're done. Now that we're done with all of our variables, we can start writing our 2 functions for this module. The first function that we need is one to load the data, and then a function to update the data. What we need to do first is actually write the functions, or, well, create the function, not write it. That's what we're currently doing. So function, module, instead of create colon, we're going to use a period. Module dot load data. You'll see why later. Player colon player as our only parameter. And the very first thing we're going to do is leader stats module colon create, and we're going to pass our player. Next, we're going to get a key. So local key equals player underscore dot dot player dot user ID. So in a string, player underscore, and then outside of the string, dot dot player dot user ID to concatenate a user ID with player. It would, I can give you an example, it would look something like this. Player underscore 5643738. That is my user ID. So that's what it's going to look like. And again, just like with the name of the data store, it is very important that you don't change how the key is structured. And another reason why we're using the user ID, you don't actually really need the string. I just like to use this for reasons. Makes it look pretty. You can just use the player's user ID, because all you really need is a unique identifier to the player. Because if you saved the data with their username, they can change their username. And if the player changes their username, then they lose all of their data. We're going to do local data attempts, because with loading and saving data, it's all asynchronous, which means that it's calling out to the Roblox website to make a call, obviously, to get something. So anything that ever says async in the function or like the method, please wrap it into a p call. If you don't know what a p call is, there's plenty of videos explaining it. It's very, very simple. A p call is essentially a safety net for if any errors occur. And because it's asynchronous, it very, very often fails trying with bad internet connection, bad ping, if the servers are kind of faulty, like if the servers are slow or are completely shut down. I don't know how to be playing Roblox if the servers are down, but whatever. So we're going to set this equal to 5. Then we're going to need a blank variable, local data table. And like I said, that's blank, so you don't need to set it equal to anything. And now we're going to make a repeat until loop. It's fairly simple. We're actually going to be getting the data now. We're going to do repeat, and I'm just going to hit enter. If you don't have autocomplete on enter turned on, then you want to do repeat, enter, enter again, and write until. And now, after the until, we're going to do space, success, or data attempts equals 0. And now inside of the repeat, sandwiched between repeat and until, we're going to do data attempts, not data table, data attempts minus equals 1, local success, error message equals pcall function. This is the pcall, the safety net, and we're going to do data table equals data store colon get async key. So we're getting this key and we're picking out that key in this data store to get certain data. And since it's data that's saved for a player, then we're going to be picking out that specific player's data, and we're going to be setting the data table variable equal to this data. Then we're going to do 2 more enters. If not success, then warn error message. And now we're going to go outside of the repeat until loop and hit enter twice. We're gonna get our leader stats folder, our cache, and our gems. Local leader stats, local cache, local gems. Now local leader stats is gonna be equal to player colon wait for child leader stats, and it should be with a lowercase l, because that's how it's named and how it has to be named if you want it to show up in the leaderboard. And then cache is going to be equal to leader stats colon wait for child cache. Gems is going to be equal to leader stats colon wait for child gems. Now we're going to do if data table is not equal to, and you do not equal to by doing a tilde, and then the equal sign, and then 2 squiggly brackets for a blank table, and data table is not equal to nil, then enter end, enter else, enter again, and in this first section, before the else, we're going to do cache.value equals datatable.cache, gems.value is equal to datatable.gems, and we're going to copy this, and where it says datatable, we're going to change this to defaults. So defaults.cache and defaults.gems. And now we're done with our load data function. Okay, so we're going to write function module.update data player colon player as our only parameter, and we're going to do local key, and we can just copy and paste this key because it needs to be the exact same. We're going to be saving this key, and it needs to load that key later. So it needs to be the exact same. And we're going to do local data attempts equals 5. Just going to do the exact same. We're just going to copy and paste the leader stats variables because we need those again. We're going to do repeat until. In the until, we're going to do success or data attempts equals 0. Between repeat and until, we're going to do the exact same thing. Data attempts minus equals 1, local success, error message equals pcall function, and this time we're going to do data store colon update async key function in these two parentheses old data. Now, if you know anything about set async, this is completely different. The way that update async, and why we should also change the data attempts to 3 instead of 5, is because the way update async works is it reads the currently saved data as the old data, so you can change stuff about the new data if you need to, related to the old data, and if you don't need to, then well, if you don't need to, then you don't do anything, but then you create new data, and the new data is what you're going to return. You're going to do return the new data. I like to create the table inside of the function. A lot of people like to just do return and then a table like this, but I don't like to do that. I like to do local new data. If old data is not equal to nil, then new data equals a table. Inside of the table, we're going to hit enter. Data ID to keep track of what version of the data is, of the data that it is. Data ID equals old data dot data ID plus 1. And make sure there's a comma. Cache equals leader stats dot cache. Wait, why am I doing that? Cache dot value, because we have this cache variable. And then we're going to do the same thing. Gems equals gems.value. And now what we're going to do is copy this, and below the table, else, new data equals this. We're going to do data ID equals 0, and the same thing. Now, this is because if this is their first time playing the game, they don't have old data. So we're going to make sure if they don't have old data, we give them a new data ID. Because if they don't have the data ID and they don't have old data, then this is going to try adding 1 to nil, and it's going to cause an error and not save the data. And outside of this if statement, we're going to do return new data. And now we're done saving. But first, what we're going to do, outside of the p call, before I finish wrapping up the script, if not success, then warn error message. Now that we've finished with that function, we can close that and go into our data framework script, delete the print hello world. So the first thing we need to do is get the players service, so local players equals game. I changed positions and now I immediately can't type. Game : get service, players. Now we need the modules, so local, or the modules folder, so local modules equals script.parent : wait for child modules, because modules folder is in server script service, so we can just access server script service by script.parent. Now we need the data manager, so local data manager equals require modules : wait for child data manager. Make sure there's 2 parentheses here. Now we're going to create a autosave interval. The reason we're going to make autosaving is so, well, to autosave, it's nice to autosave people's data. So local autosave interval equals 5 times 60. Now the reason we're doing this number instead of just going to Google and searching how many seconds is in 5 minutes, we can just do 5 times 60, because in 5 minutes there are 300 seconds. And if we just do 5 times 60, you can see that's equal to 300. So doing it this way, this is the number of minutes, and we multiply it by 60 seconds. And that gives us how many seconds we need to be able to wait that long. And it also makes it much easier, so if you ever want to change this to like 10 minutes, instead of just going to Google and searching it up to get 600, you can just do 10 times 60 equals 600. Or if you did 6 minutes, which is 360 seconds, and so on and so forth. I'm setting the interval to 5 minutes. I wouldn't recommend it making it any less than 3, and any higher than 8. I 100% recommend just making it 5 minutes. Now we're going to write one function, and one function only. Local function, save all data, for underscore comma player, in players, nope, not pairs, in players get players do. So what this is going to do is it's going to loop through every single player that's currently in the game, and we're going to save all of their data by doing data manager.update data player. So this function will save all of the data for every single player in the game. And now we're going to do players.player added connect function. Not connect function. We're going to do connect data manager.load data. Now, this is why it was important that we did a period instead of a colon, because this doesn't work. This does not work. When you're running a function from a module or from a table inside of a connect, it has to be a dot, otherwise it's not going to work. And now we're going to do the same thing, but for player removing. So players.player removing connect data manager, and instead of load data, we're going to do update data, and it's going to automatically pass the player for us, so we don't need to do that. And now we're going to do one more thing, or two more things really. Task.spawn function, so we can have a while wait loop that gets ran but doesn't ignore everything else below it. So inside of the task.spawn, we're going to do while task.wait autosave interval do. I accidentally misspelled do save all data, print auto saved data for data for all players. And outside of the task.spawn, we're going to do game bind to close function save all data. And now we're done. Now the reason we're doing game bind to close is because when the last player leaves the game, without bind to close, it's just going to completely ignore everything, stop the server, and either none or not all of their data is going to get saved by the time the server stops. And what bind to close does is when the last player leaves the game, it'll wait for all of this code to finish running before it shuts down the server. Now, in the actual Roblox client, it's not going to wait longer than 45 seconds. But all of their data, hopefully, if they don't have like absolute toaster potato McDonald's garbage Wi-Fi, all of their data will save in less than 45 seconds. And then the server's going to shut down when it finishes saving the data. And see, if two players leave at the same time, and those are the only two players in the server, that's still going to cause the server to shut down. So that's why we're saving all of the data, and not just the data for the last player in the game. Because there could be two players left in the game, and they left at the exact same time. Or if you're shutting down your game, all of the servers are going to shut down, and there's going to be a whole bunch of players in there. So we're saving all of the data. So now we are done, and we can test this out. We can close the script, play, and you'll see I have no data. Sorry if I'm breathing really heavy. I'm not used to talking this much. I haven't recorded a video in 3 months. And I just ate, so all of my food's trying to come back up at the same time. So I'm going to go into the players, into my player, the leader stats. Well, actually, I'm not going to do that on the client. I'm going to do that on the server. I'm going to change my cash to 100 and my gems to 50. You'll notice that I didn't have any saved data because I haven't played before. So we switch back. Leader stats, 100 cash, 50 gems. In the properties, 100 cash, 50 gems. Stop the game. You'll notice it waits longer than it usually does when you don't have bind to close, and I'll rejoin the game. And boom, 100 cash and 50 gems. So that's going to do it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you found it useful. Congratulations on setting up the data store, and now being able to save data for your game. If you have a much larger project, I recommend you go watch my profile service tutorial on my channel. Goodbye.